Hi, APE students. Are we ready to burn some rice? Let's talk about what you'll be doing in the rice production lab. The purpose of this lab is to calculate the nutrient and water loss in the production of paddy rice, and we'll be spending 3 days on the lab. On the first day, we'll set up our experiment to calculate the percent of water in our rice sample, and that's pretty straightforward. Let me show you what that data table is going to look like. You'll basically be massing some rice, putting it in a crucible, and letting it sit in the drying oven overnight. And on the second day, while you're burning your rice, you can go through and perform these calculations. You'll see that the equation for the percent of water is simply the final mass of rice minus m to the naught, or the initial mass of rice, divided by initial times 100. So change divided by starting value times 100. And ultimately what you'll do is share out those the averages that you got for percent of water, and we'll use class average data to do our analysis. After we've gotten the rice all dried out and all the water removed, on the second day, you're going to calculate the percent of ash, which involves burning the rice under the fume hood in the crucible in a clay triangle with a ring stand with the Bunsen burner below it. Some of us will have to go down to the chemistry lab to use the gas jets that are under the fume hoods in the chemistry lab. So we'll find a space for us. And the ash that is left over then in that sample of rice actually represents the nutrients that remained. We're not going to burn the nutrients. So everything that is left in that ash is the nutrient component of the rice. So there are 3 different data tables that you can see that you're going to incorporate as you set up your pre-lab. We've already taken a look at the percent water one. Let's take a look at what that second part of the procedure is going to look like. So you can see an example of about how far the Bunsen burner is away from the ring stand with the clay triangle that very carefully is going to be holding your crucible. And you can see what that rice sample looks like as you're burning it. The rice was kind of brown to begin with, and you can see it getting black and charred around the edges as it's burning. So the first data table that you'll copy into your packet has got Asian rice production from a number of different countries or regions around the world. And while you're working on other aspects, waiting for your rice sample to dry or working on burning it, you can go ahead and do this percent or calculate this yield in tons per hectare. I'll point out that the production in tons is based on hundreds of thousands of tons, just as the acreage is based on hundreds of thousands of hectares. So we can just sort of cancel out the 3 zeros for each of those values, and I simply have my ton value divided by my hectare value, and you will record the answer for that then as the yield. That second data table, as we already looked at, is your percent water table, pretty straightforward. The third data table then is where we'll collect some class data to get the means or averages. All you're really going to need for this is to set up a spreadsheet or an Excel spreadsheet, and those class averages will be calculated, all of the data and the class averages will be calculated pretty easily for you. So I've put some sample data in here so you can see what it looks like. I've got my initial mass of my crucible, the initial mass of the rice, the mass of the crucible and ash. So notice that the mass of ash calculation, I simply put in as a formula. You've got to be a little bit careful. The letters that are on your initial data table aren't necessarily going to be the letters that line up on your Excel spreadsheet. So notice that to get the mass of ash, I have D2 minus B2, so the mass of crucible and ash minus the mass of the crucible. And then I just highlighted and dragged that formula down so it could do that calculation once I enter other teams' data. The percent of water is what we've already calculated previously in that first data table. So there's not a calculation to enter there. And then the percent of ash, notice that my formula there is cell E2, or the mass of the ash, divided by So the percent of ash is the mass of the ash divided by the initial mass of the rice. So what's remaining from that is my percent ash. And again, I can carry that down through all the cells to get the average once I enter all of the data. Lab procedure is pretty straightforward, but we'll get the exciting part when we go in to process that data and explain it. See you in class.